Today we are here to talk about how to give feedback that people can act on. And we are really going to focus in on tasks and execution. We're going to start with what the problem is. We're going to talk about what it looks like in practice. And then we're going to talk about how do we fix it? Because that's really what we're here for. What's the problem? How do we fix it? So in the last two videos, we talked about two different things. The first thing we talked about was how delaying feedback quietly costs your culture. Because when you delay feedback, you are allowing behaviors that are ineffective to occur over and over and over again, which means now you've created a pattern. And as we talked about, patterns are much harder to correct than a singular moment in time. We also talked about why leaders avoid feedback in the first place, and we found that the majority of the time it's coming from a place of caring. But you're caring to the point where you're actually harming the people on your team because you're not being direct, you're not being clear, and remember, being clear is being kind. But there is another breakdown that happens, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Even when feedback is given, it's not clear enough to act on. And most of the time it sounds like things that we say every single day. It has worked its way into our workplace vocabulary. And they feel normal to say, you hear them all the time, but they don't actually create clarity. So in this video, we are going to focus on feedback on the work itself, what to do differently, what to change, what right actually looks like. And then in the next video, we're going to get into feedback on behavior, because behavior-based feedback is a whole different animal. It is much more nuanced and whole separate conversation. So keep your eye out for that next video. But today, tasks and execution. So we're going to start with the problem. Even when feedback happens, it's often not clear because vague language does not equal clear direction. And a lot of feedback doesn't sound like feedback. As I just said, it sounds like normal workplace language. Things like any updates, what's the status, thoughts. And it feels like you've said something. And sure, you voiced words or you typed them, so yes, technically you have said something. But if you slow down and actually take a beat to look at what you said, none of it actually explains what you truly want the person to do. There's no clear expectation, there's no ownership, no timeline, which means that people will not and cannot actually execute with clarity because you are forcing them, unintentionally or not, to interpret what it is that you want. So let's talk about the pattern. If you start with unclear expectation and unclear direction, it is going to lead to someone having to interpret what it is that you want. And if they interpret it, they may interpret it wrong, which is going to lead to inconsistency. And if there's inconsistency, it is eventually going to lead to ineffective patterns because they're going to start assuming that what you're saying and what they're doing is actually what you want. And then you're saying to yourself, this is not what I wanted, but now you're delaying feedback because you want to protect the relationship. It snowballs. And this is where the real issue starts. Because when direction isn't clear, people don't just stop working. Like, I used to have an old boss, leader, whatever you want to call them, somebody that I reported to in the chain of command, that was so vague when I would have one-on-ones, like the vaguest of vagues. And I would try to clarify, I would ask clarifying questions, but I would walk out of that office going, I have zero idea of what they want me to do next. I mean, I know we have to execute on this deliverable, but I just gave them all of these different pieces and they just talked in circles and I'm super unclear. So what would happen is I would go back to my space and I would turn to my really good friend who was a coworker, you know, those great coworkers who turn into your work best friends. And I would say, hey, so I just had this meeting with such and such, and they said X, Y, and Z. What are you taking from that? And they would give me their interpretation. And then I might go down to like the third floor and talk to someone else, another trusted leader, and say, hey, my leader just talked to me in a one-on-one, and this is what I'm working on, and what do you take from it? And then they would give me their interpretation, and guess what? Their interpretation and my other person's interpretation, they were completely different, and then it was also different from my interpretation. So I would take what I could use or thought that I could use that was valuable, and then I would just start executing. So the thing is, people don't stop working, right? They keep moving, but now they are operating based on what they think that you meant. And that interpretation, like I just mentioned, is for sure going to vary from person to person. And that's how you end up with inconsistency and misalignment and frustration that no one can quite explain. And over time, those small moments turn into patterns, not just for you, like in terms of how you're executing as the individual contributor, but they also turn into problems for how that individual contributor views their leader and the patterns that they're seeing that are inconsistent. And that's kind of what we talked about in our first video. These patterns are much harder to fix. So the shift in our mindset. The shift in our mindset needs to be three things: specific, clear expectations, clear next steps. And the goal isn't just to give more feedback or say more words. It's to make the task-based feedback clear enough so that your team member knows exactly what they're supposed to do next. Effective feedback does three things. It anchors to something specific, it provides a clear expectation, and there is zero question on what should happen next. And if any of those are missing, the feedback is incomplete. And when it's incomplete, people are not going to be able to execute consistently. They're going to fill in the gaps. They're going to just execute on what their version of good looks like, which may vary from what the leader's version of good looks like. So let's jump into some examples. First example, this is what it sounds like. What's the status? So if you email or ping them or say to them in passing, hey, what's the status on deliverable A? To that leader, to you, it might feel like you're just quick check-in. Hey, what's the status on deliverable A? And you're trying to signal, hey, I don't know where this project or deliverable stands. I need to find out. But then the person receiving this has to guess, well, what kind of update did they want? Like, which part of deliverable A are you concerned about? How detailed do you want this? When do you need it by? When do you expect it? So you would want to say in this instance something more along the lines of, can you send me a high-level update by end of day with where deliverable A stands and any milestone risks? Now it's clear. And with all of these examples, obviously you can't just take them packaged as is because you're all working on something different. Your industries are different. These are all just high-level examples to help you see what clear feedback actually sounds like versus the vague feedback. What's the status? And we've all heard, hey, what's the status on da-da-da-da-da? You know, I know you know. Our second example, one of my personal favorites, thoughts. Woo, hey, guess what? I have thoughts. We have thoughts. Which thoughts precisely did you want me to send you? Because you may feel like you are being collaborative, but not only is this unclear, it reads as slightly almost passive-aggressive. Like, are you asking for buy-in? Are you asking for edits? Are you asking for a different direction entirely? Are we at the stage where we are only accepting compliments? And a lot of people are going to get annoyed by this ask. They might get annoyed, or they may overthink your ask, and they may respond in a way that doesn't move anything forward or throws up roadblocks where there weren't any before. Or if you send this, like let's say you send thoughts to multiple people on your team, like let's just say you're working on a deliverable where you're partnering with 4 or 5 other teams that have stakeholders, and you take that entire email thread and you take what everybody has put in and you send and forward that email thread to, let's say, 4 of your team members, and you just write thoughts, ? Super unclear ask, which means you're going to get a super unclear response, and one of two things is going to happen. People are either going to wait until someone else responds, and then they're just going to follow whatever that person's lead was, because that's way less of a cognitive lift. So whoever the first person is that speaks is going to be, that's the direction your team is now running in. They're all going to agree, yep, I second what such and such said. Perfect. The other thing that might happen is the person might start making assumptions about you as the leader in terms of, why are they just asking for thoughts? Like, did they think this through? I don't know what they need from me. And they just might really start thinking about how it is that you're performing in your role as a leader, and are you being consistent, and are you doing your share of the work? Because this one can really trigger some people. So instead of just saying thoughts, maybe be a little bit more specific, have a more clear ask, and say, do you agree with this direction, or would you change anything before we move forward? Something along those lines, because now you've defined the ask and people can truly respond. Thoughts is just way too vague. We use it all the time though. Example 3, we should, right? If you communicate to your team, we should follow that by anything. Please know that this is one of the easiest ways that work gets talked about, but it never actually gets done, because we should equates to there's no owner, which means there's no action. And if there's no timeline, no decision, you're truly talking in abstracts. So instead, you want to say something more along the lines of, hey, can you edit the text for conciseness and clarity? Like, we want to make sure that our language is elevating the core message we aligned on. And if you're in a team setting, maybe then you turn to the person who does graphic design on your team and you say, hey, person B, can you edit the graphics to make them align closer to our brand? Right now, they seem a little generic. Let's try using images just from our marketing brand library. And then you close it with a clear call to action and say, let's have that completed, sent back over to me by end of day tomorrow. Does that work with everyone's timeline? You discuss. Perfect. I'll then make any final edits based on what you sent over. And then in our Thursday stand-up, we're going to review the finished product and determine go or no go. Does that sound good? Now there's ownership and movement. We should never just be said in abstracts, because again, people are just going to talk about the work, have lots of meetings about the work, but nothing's actually going to get done. All right, example 4, ASAP. Can you get this to me ASAP? So that sounds super urgent, sure, but it's not specific. ASAP to you might mean today. It might mean in a few hours. It just might mean soon, whatever that means, because that is also relative, by the way. Instead, be specific. I need this by 2 p.m. today. Does that timeline work? The second part of this question is almost as important as the first, because if your team member has other priorities that they're juggling that you've already put on their plate, and this one comes in and it's an urgent ask and it needs to get done ASAP, perfect. What does ASAP mean? And also, what on their list of priorities now needs to be shifted down in the list so that they can make time for this new ask? So now urgency is not just clear, you've aligned on what matters for the day, and you've co-signed with them on the new plan. And that alone is going to make your team member feel seen, feel valued, feel heard, and feel much more settled, because you've shown them as a leader that you understand their workload, and you have understood that if something new gets added to the plate, something else has to get moved down the priority list. And then finally, our last example, example 5, can you take a look at this? So if you send a document over and say, can you take a look at this? It definitely sounds like a request, but again, it's an unclear ask and there's low ownership. It's not clear what you want. So fun fact, my husband consistently, randomly sends me screenshots of places, a picture of something, an email with like zero context. And every time I get one of these messages, I think to myself, like without fail, I'm sorry, but am I supposed to know what to do with this? And I pick up the phone and I call him and I say, hey, you just sent me this email. What does this mean? What do you need me to do? I don't understand, because I mean, it's truly not clear. And he doesn't even say, can you take a look? Like, he just sends it. But hey, here's the thing. I know that he's doing it because he's super busy and it just popped into his mind and he thought, ooh, let me send this over to her before I forget, because he knows as well as the day is long that he married someone who is 100% going to follow up on that and figure out, what is this? What am I supposed to do with this? And what happens next? But hey, guess what? We know each other really well. Like, we know we're married. Of course he knows me well and I know him well. You're not married to any member of your team. No one on your team knows you that well. So they're going to wonder, are you asking for feedback? Are you asking for buy-in? Are you asking for edits? Are you at a stage where you want critiques? Like, what do you want me to actually take a look at? So instead, try saying something like, try saying something like, can you review this deliverable against our scope of work and send me your recommendations by tomorrow at noon? Now it's actionable, right? You want to make sure it's actionable and clear on what you want them to take a look at and what you want them to do. So why does this keep happening? This is where it ties back into what we talked about before. Softening clarity does not protect the relationship, it actually creates confusion. And it's really the vague language a lot of times is coming because there is something that they are trying to protect, right? You're trying to protect someone's feelings, you're trying to come off as not being a super jerk face, right? So instead of being direct, you soften your ask to the point of vagueness. And you leave the question open-ended and you simply hope and pray that the other person is going to fill in the gaps correctly. But when you soften clarity, like you're not protecting the relationship, you're actually hurting it because you're creating confusion. Other times, vague language shows up because the leader hasn't truly thought through what they actually want or what they actually need. And this language that we just talked about, it works as a filler, right? It shows up because they feel like they're keeping the ball moving, because they may be in another meeting with their phone out, looking at their messages on Teams or Slack or whatever program your company uses. And something came up in that meeting and they don't want to forget it. And so they go ahead and they send something over to you real quick and they just write thoughts or status update. And they feel like they've kept the ball moving and now they can kind of check it off their mental task list. And I know you know what I'm talking about, but remember that movement is not action. If your emails or pings or conversations create confusion and people on your team have to ask their coworkers to help them interpret it, you as the leader need to slow down just a touch and think about what is it that I actually need before you fire off that next message, and make sure that you're clear about what you need. And okay, mini side rant, okay? If one of your team members sends you an email and it has 3 questions, like at the top, hey leader, I have 3 questions for you. 1, 2, 3, they've numbered them. And you email them back and you only answer the first question, please, for the love that is like all the love for everything good and holy in this world, like please answer all 3 questions. Because when you only answer the first one and the person gets it back, like you are sending them into a spiral. I'm not talking from personal experience or anything. Because what they want to do in that moment is they want to email you back immediately, highlight the second 2 questions and go, hi, can you read? Like, did you not see this? Are you not answering because you don't care? Are you not answering because you don't know? They're having to like fill in all of these gaps and it drives them mad. So if you're somebody that does that, it is wasting a ton of time. It is forcing your team to expend emotional energy that they don't need to be doing. And please just stop it. So if someone sends you an email with 3 questions, 2 questions, whatever it is, make sure you answer or address each of them and don't just ignore them. That was my little side rant. So if you want a simple way to check your daily in-process feedback on tasks and execution, just use very simple, right? What specifically am I asking for? By when do I need it? And what should it look like? Because if those aren't clear, the person receiving the feedback is going to be forced to guess. So our key takeaway here is that vague language does not equal clear direction. And most daily in-process feedback doesn't fail because people don't care. It fails because it's not clear enough to act on. And if they don't have clear direction, they don't pause, they simply interpret, and those interpretations are going to be what leads to long-term behavior changes and bigger problems over time. So in this video, we focused on task-based execution and what we can do differently to achieve more aligned execution. And if you've made it this far in the video, I'm going to assume that you are interested in practical leadership insights. And if that's you, consider subscribing because there are going to be new videos posted every single week. And in the next video, as I talked about at the beginning, we're going to talk about giving feedback on behavior, which is where things get much more nuanced and quite frankly, complicated. So that's its own special session. My friends, different conversation, very rich conversation, and a conversation that is largely transferable from professional to personal life as well. So a question for you to marinate on. What is a message that you've gotten from a leader or a team member that made you think, what am I supposed to do with this? Drop it in the comments because I would love nothing more than to hear these from you. So I will leave you with this. If they have to guess, it's not clear, and clarity drives execution. Until next time, pay attention to how clear you actually are when it comes to tasks and execution. You may be being more vague than you think. So self-awareness and acting on that self-awareness absolutely helps. Just saying.